Hey guys, it's Todd Christensen here. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite things in the world, and that's physical activity. Over the last 12 years working in the fitness industry in several capacities, I've noticed a few trends, some that come and go, and then also some that stick around for a very long time and are still around. And so we're going to talk about some of those trends here in this presentation. As we get started, I want to start with this quote from a research article done in 1988 by Eaton, Shostak, and Connor. It says the exercise boom is not just a fad. It is a return to natural activity, the kind for which our bodies are engineered and which facilitates the proper function of our biochemistry and physiology. Viewed through the perspective of evolutionary time, sedentary existence, possible for great numbers of people only during the last century, represents a transient, unnatural aberration. I don't know about you guys, but when I read that, I see lots of strong words. It's this return to natural activity, saying that not exercising is unnatural. It promotes proper function, all these wonderful things. And then, it points out that sedentary existence wasn't even possible 100 years ago. Just daily activity required so much more physical activity, and so it wasn't even as possible to be sedentary. Now, with the change in jobs and the change in screen time and all those different things, we're just much more sedentary now than we were even in 1988 when they wrote this. And so I would just love to know what the authors would say. Now, here we are 30 years later, much more sedentary. I would just love to see how they would revise this quote now. And so one of the foundational works that's been done in research on physical activity was the 1996 Surgeon General's report. And in this Surgeon General's report, it covered all sorts of wonderful things on physical activity. It was commissioned by the Surgeon General in 1994, and the Surgeon General brought the CDC in to be the lead agency in the investigation, and the CDC brought in all of the major players in health and wellness, education, and research here in the U.S. You can see on the list some of the greatest minds in the nation. Again, were represented. They were commissioned to compile all the data on physical activity and health, and specifically, they were commissioned to compile all the data that just focused on the preventative benefits of physical activity. They excluded everything that talked about physical activity as treatment post-diagnosis. And so through the 2 years of research and before publishing, they came to some major conclusions. Some of these won't be a surprise to you, and so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but everyone can benefit from physical activity. All ages, genders, ethnicities, everyone can benefit from physical activity. And they found that significant health benefits can be attained with moderate physical activity. It doesn't have to be vigorous, just moderate. But they did find that increases in the amount or increases in the intensity of the physical activity does increase. Those increases do increase the benefits that are attained for health. Then also they went on to talk about how physical activity decreases premature death, and then many chronic diseases. We know in health field, we know that many of the leading causes of death here in the U.S. are chronic diseases that are many of them preventable. And there are many of them are prevented by increased physical activity. And so, again, not a surprise for us. It does go on to talk about how physical activity improves mental health. 60% of adults in the U.S. don't meet the guidelines for physical activity, and 25% had zero physical activity on a regular basis. And then again, this is 1996. Those numbers have changed some, but this was the starting point. It went on to talk about how roughly 50% of youth, so that's ages 12 to 21, junior high through college years, no regular vigorous activity. So they might have some moderate or light activity, but half of them have no regular vigorous activity. And then they did confirm that physical activity declines significantly during adolescence. As we, approach into those high school, college years, it just gets lower and lower. They went on to talk about some of the physiologic responses to physical activity. And again, some of these, many of these we know. And so we're just going to walk through here. We can see they found major effects on cardiovascular and musculoskeletal systems, and then also considerable effects on the metabolic, endocrine, and immune systems. And so all of the major functions in our body have considerable to major effects from physical activity. They did find that those effects can diminish as exercise diminishes. If exercise is diminished, those positive effects can be reduced over a 2-week period, but if exercise is diminished for longer, 2 to 8 months, those positive effects can completely disappear. They went on to talk about physical activity and disease, and some of the major diseases. Obviously, overall mortality. Higher physical activity leads to lower mortality rates. Cardiovascular disease. We know that physical activity is good for our heart, and so higher and regular physical activity can lower cardiovascular and coronary heart disease, as well as lowering blood pressure. They found relationship between physical activity and several cancers, but the only one that was significant relationship was regular physical activity can decrease the risk of colon cancer. They did find, which we know, regular physical activity can lower the risk of non-insulin dependent diabetes, and then also weight-bearing physical activity leads to greater bone density. We know that especially during those formative early years, and then also as we reach the older years, that weight-bearing exercise is great for increasing that bone density. Then they talked about how physical activity and just some quality of life things, talking about fall risks in older adults, and how regular physical activity lowers that risk. And we understand in fitness that as we help someone with their rate of force development, we help them be able to generate the force to move a leg out and catch themselves instead of falling over. We greatly decrease the risk of falls. We know that lower physical activity leads to higher BMIs. The less we move, the fewer calories we burn. Therefore, we find ourselves in a calorie surplus oftentimes. We know that regular physical activity decreases the symptoms of depression while also increasing our positive mood. So mental health improves with physical activity, and then just general health-related quality of life things. We know that regular physical activity can lead to improved cognitive and physical functioning. And so we just in general are going to perform better at life when we have regular physical activity in our lives. Then moving on to some of the trends in physical activity found in this Surgeon General's report. Just talking about adults, so this is ages 22 and older. 15% engaged in regular, so 3 times a week for at least 20 minutes, regular, vigorous physical activity, while 22% engaged in regular, so this is 30 minutes sustained. So that's the key here of any intensity. So 30 minutes of sustained physical activity, only 22% had that regularly, so 5 times per week, 30 minutes per session, and then 25% of adults no physical activity per week at all. They did see that physical inactivity was more prevalent in women than men, and so here kind of the first time we're talking about this trend that men move more than women. We see it several times throughout the literature. And then, we're not naive. I know that not everyone wants to come in and work out, and they have other ways to get their physical activity. And so the most popular leisure time physical activities were walking and yard work, gardening, lots of things. It doesn't have to be going to a gym. There are lots of ways to get that physical activity. They went on to talk about adolescents and young adults, so that 12 to 21 years of age again. And as we already said, 50% of them don't engage in regular vigorous physical activity, and there's that 25% again. 25% have no physical activity per week, and here again, even in this younger age, physical inactivity is more prevalent in females than in males. And here, the unique one here to this age group is that males are more likely than females to engage in vigorous physical activity. And so now we begin talking about just specifically physical activity in college. Every year, the American College Health Association does what's called the National College Health Assessment. It's a survey that goes out that we at OSU in the Department of Wellness, we actually pay a whole lot of money to administer this to several thousand students every year. We're actually in the process of compiling our most recent survey. But I pulled, just as a benchmark, pulled that turn of the century 2000 National College Health Assessment. I pulled it, and then it was also referenced in this Buckworth and Nigg 2003 article that showed that 57% of males failed to meet regular physical activity recommendation, and 61% of females. So again, we see in college, males are moving a little bit more than females. There's a 4% difference there. This article went on to talk about how physical activity is a very serious and very pervasive health concern, and talked about how it was actually added to the 2010 Healthy People campaign and 2010 Healthy Campuses campaign. These huge campaigns that roll out in an attempt to make people healthier. And one of the main things that they address is, let's just get people moving, get rid of the physical inactivity. And they did cite in their study, I think it was a study of 493 college students, they found that the males exercised an average of 238 minutes per week, while the females averaged 115 minutes per week. So again, we see these females just not moving as much as the males. And then also, there was a significant effect in their study. There was a significant effect of age on physical activity levels. And so they found that the freshmen were moving more than the sophomores, who were moving more than the juniors, and who were moving more than the seniors. And so again, just continuing with that progressive decline that starts in adolescence, that as age goes, we move less. And that drop in physical activity levels across the age was more significant in females than males. And so now the most recent survey that has been compiled and everything was the 2016 National College Health Assessment. It surveyed just over 27,000 students from 51 different colleges. Not a huge percentage of total, but still a healthy sampling of 27,000 students. And of those 27,000, 50% of males met the regular physical activity recommendation, while only 41% of females met the same recommendation. And so there's a 9% difference, whereas the 2000, there was only a 4% difference. And so we can see that the difference is getting bigger over time. So specifically talking about physical activity here at OSU, I just wanted to highlight some things. We're set up pretty well here at OSU from the very top down, with our first Cowgirl promoting healthy initiatives all the time. We talk about being America's healthiest campus. That's not obviously something that we can actually prove that we are, but it's something that we're striving for constantly. And so physical activity is readily available, if you will, lots of options. We have these departments on campus that can become certified healthy departments by our Department of Wellness if they take part in initiatives and do some things above and beyond. They can achieve that as a department. Within our Department of Wellness, we have fitness, which is where I work, and then employee wellness, intramurals, and outdoor adventure. And then also, we have events and programs sponsored by other departments. SUAB puts on fun runs, and just several other departments on campus organize different physical activity options. And so the point being, physical activity at OSU is kind of seen in as a priority. It's pursued and promoted from the top down, and so we, at OSU should be a pretty good representation of college health, physical activity numbers. So from my observation, I indirectly observe every single day, over 40 hours a week, just as part of my job. I supervise all of the fitness floors, which means I'm constantly monitoring numbers. I'm constantly observing foot traffic, who's here, who's coming, all those things. I'm constantly monitoring those trends, pulling the numbers, hard numbers. And so I'm indirectly have been observing this for 5 weeks. And then also lots of reports from my staff of 140 undergraduate students that work for us, and constantly reporting on numbers and trends, and then also our other professional staff reporting on their individual areas. So some primary locations that I'm constantly monitoring are the front check-in desk where everyone swipes in, the weight room, the group fitness classes. We check people in for those, and so those are numbers that we can pull. The climbing wall, again, people check in, so we can pull those numbers. The performance studio, the free rec spaces, we count every hour on the hour, and so that being the basketball courts, racquetball courts, any free open space where people can just come play badminton or whatever they want to do. And then also our intramural sites. All of those are numbers that we track and we count on a regular basis. But for this observation, I directly observed 1 hour during each of the main rush times, early morning, lunchtime, and evening. Just really observed what the traffic was like during those times, and because I've just noticed, and our staff has noticed, a decline, one in the number of people compared to last year, but also a decline in our female population specifically. Not as big of a change in males, but a pretty healthy change in females. And so again, just continuing to see that trend of the males, at least at the Colvin, engaging more physical activity. So the results of the observation, just some general ones. I noticed significantly or noticeably higher participation by males compared to females, no matter what area I was in, with the exception of group fitness classes are slightly more attended by females than males, and then also the cardio area is slightly more used by females than males. Not significantly big differences, but there is a difference. But the other areas, the free rec spaces, the weight room, the performance studio, intramurals, some of those other spaces are substantially more used by males than females. And then also I just noticed that it's a low percentage of participants when you compare who's using our facilities and all of our programs compared to total enrollment of the university. And so to follow up on the observation, I just went and pulled a bunch of hard data. I just was curious what the numbers actually showed, and so I just pulled those things. And so it showed that we had 98,000 total swipes at the Saratine and the Colvin combined during the first 5 weeks of school, and that represents roughly 7,000 unique users. And so 7,000 unique users out of 25,000 roughly enrolled at OSU. Not the greatest numbers. And so again, there's a trend. We're not reaching all the people that we could, or maybe that we should. Of those 98,000 total swipes, 60% of them were by males and 40% were by females. If I went and pulled all of our numbers for intramurals, and we have 20,000 currently registered in intramurals, roughly 20,000, just over, with 72% of those being male compared to only 28% female. 3,000 members of our outdoor adventure and climbing wall areas, and 65% of those are male compared to 35% female. And so, again, I know that we are not the only options for our college students for physical activity, but we are a predominant option. And even those that are coming to us it is predominantly and noticeably skewed toward males compared to females. So what's next? Well, there's some further research that needs to be done, and these are things that we're already doing and we're going to continue to do, and that's address the reasons that individuals aren't coming to the Saratine or the Colvin. Why aren't we reaching a higher percentage of our enrollment numbers? Why aren't we reaching more females? What is it that we need to do? Maybe determining what voids we have in our program offerings. What is it that we're not offering that maybe the females want? And so those are the questions that we're constantly asking. Focus groups and things like that. Pulling in a focus group we did in the spring of just females and just trying to figure out, why don't you all want to be here, and what could we do to make it more welcoming? And so we need to continue to pursue those things, and we need to investigate those other off-campus forms of regular physical activity. Frisbee golf, at the walking Boomer Lake, whatever it is, there are lots of options, and we know that. But we just need to figure out, are our students engaging in those, or are they being physically inactive? And so just in general, as we close down, we know in health promotion, we know that moderate physical activity can lead to substantial health benefits. But as I look at the numbers and I see that, we're reaching a very, very, very small percentage of our enrollment numbers, that means there are a lot of people out there that aren't reaping the benefits of physical activity, the substantial health benefits of physical activity. This college time where people are creating habits that'll last them for a lifetime. Unfortunately, some are creating unhealthy habits, and they're creating habits of inactivity versus activity, and so they're not getting those benefits. And so times are changing, and so we need to also we are becoming a more sedentary people, and so we as a Department of Wellness need to program. We need to do everything we can to change what we're doing to become more appealing. If there are things that we can do, we need to do that. There are no sacred calves. Everything is on the chopping block. If it's not bringing people in, if it's not engaging people, then it doesn't need to be part of our programming. And so we, Department of Wellness, Health Promotion, everyone need to pull together to figure out what it is that we can do to engage more college students, and specifically narrow the gap between males and females. What is it that we can do to get more females physically moving, to get rid of that discrepancy?